Lilith is the woman mentioned in Genesis chapter 1, while Eve was the woman mentioned in Genesis chapter 2. Lilith betrayed Adam and became the bride of Satan and the mother of demons. At least this is the way Lilith was portrayed by some in the early 2nd millennium CE. The story of Lilith, however, dates back thousands of years and spans countless civilizations. And these are her true origins. The astute reader...
Okay, hi guys and gals, VCK here. Well, this is about Lilith, which is about me. So I want to see how close they are to who I am. Right now, I see the reddish purple hair. Yes. I don't know about the yellow eyes. Actually, my eyes are blue. The owls. Oh yeah. Knowledge, intelligence. Yes. Okay, let's see what he has to say. Oh, well, we don't want to see that.
Known by legend as Adam's first wife, she
Oh,
was the
now I
first
got red eyes.
before Eve was even created and before the eating of the forbidden fruit in the garden. Lilith is the woman mentioned in Genesis chapter 1, while Eve was the woman mentioned in Genesis chapter 2. Lilith betrayed Adam and became the bride of Satan and the mother of demons. At least this is the way Lilith was portrayed by...
Okay, first of all, that is not true. Alright, now I am the first wife, and then Adam and I did not work out. No, we were made from the same thing, given the same thing. He just got the male parts and I got the female parts. Okay, we both got the same heart, the same soul, the same bronze. Okay, we were as strong as each other physically. No weak woman here. Okay, and we were both rams, bulls. You know, same zodiac, we came up the same time. We were essentially the same male and female who both, I guess, wanted to be the boss. So, we fought. Okay? Things didn't work out. But I'm not a demon mother. I'm a mother, but not a demon mother. That is what you guys have got wrong. Because I've seen that on another program.
Some in the early 2nd millennium CE. The story of Lilith, however, dates back thousands of years and spans countless civilizations. And these are her true origins. The astute reader of the first 2 chapters of Genesis will notice that Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 seem to contain 2 different accounts of the creation of humankind. For many Jews and Christians today, they do not see these 2 accounts as different. The explanation often given for this is that Genesis chapter 2 simply expands on the information given in Genesis chapter 1. Biblical scholarship since the early 1900s has taken a slightly different approach to answering this question. The leading theory today among Old Testament scholars as to why there are two different accounts in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is called the documentary hypothesis, which suggests that Moses did not write the Pentateuch, aka the first 5 books of the Bible. The documentary hypothesis theorizes that the book of Genesis is a composite text made up of many different texts stitched and woven together by several different people over different time periods living in different locations throughout the ancient Near East. But these two explanations have not always been the understanding. Ancient people wondered about this very question as well, and at times they came up with very different theories, and their theories usually came in the form of creating new and expansive stories to fill in the gaps. And by the end of the first millennium CE, there was a perfect opportunity for the legend of Lilith to fill that gap. According to an anonymous Jewish text titled The Alphabet of Ben Sira, dating to the Middle Ages, the reason there is a difference between Genesis 1 and 2 is because there are two very different stories. The first created woman in Genesis 1 wasn't Eve, but an evil demon named Lilith. Eve didn't come into the story until Genesis chapter 2. So who was Lilith? What are her origins, and how did she eventually become viewed as being Adam's first demonic wife? To thoroughly trace the origins and history of Lilith, we must first travel back in time over 5,000 years to one of the most ancient civilizations of all time, the civilization of Sumer. The Sumerian peoples were the first civilization to permanently settle into the land of Mesopotamia, which is located primarily in modern-day Iraq, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The earliest mythology of Lilith was likely born here in Sumerian oral tradition. We know very little of who Lilith might have been during this time period, considering oral tradition is, by definition, oral and not written down. However, scholars believe that the mythology of Lilith must have been originally passed down orally because she, or more accurately, they, feature prominently in later Sumerian texts. The concept of Lilith first appeared in Sumerian myth in the 3rd millennium BCE, and were a class of wind and storm demons called the Lilitu. One of, if not the earliest references of Lilith can be found in the ancient Sumerian text called Inanna in the Halupu tree. This story was likely passed down orally initially until it was eventually written down between 2900 and 2750 BCE. Inanna in the Halupu tree is a wonderful little story about Enki, the Sumerian god of creation and wisdom, who plants a tree near the bank of the Euphrates River. One day, a strong south wind uprooted the tree and blew it into the Euphrates River. As the tree was floating down the river, Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love, beauty, and sex, plucked the tree out of the river and planted it in her holy garden in the Sumerian city of Uruk. Inanna cared for this tree day and night, wondering how long it would take until the tree was big enough to make for herself a throne.
Not Shimona, it's
10 years
Shamira.
passed and the tree was now thick and tall. But then, the text says, then a serpent who could not be charmed made its nest in the roots of the Halupu tree. Then Anzu, the bird god, set his young in the branches of the tree, and the dark maid Lilith built her home in the trunk. Inanna, the young woman who loved to laugh, began to weep. Oh, how Inanna wept, yet they would not leave her tree. Then the mighty hero Gilgamesh, yes, the same Gilgamesh from the very popular Epic of Gilgamesh, came in to save the day. Gilgamesh came to Inanna's rescue, adorned in his extremely heavy battle armor and wielding a 700-pound bronze axe. Gilgamesh strikes the serpent dead, causing the Anzu bird to fly away. Then Gilgamesh smashed Lilith's home, driving her to flee into the wild, uninhabited wilderness. In this most ancient story of Lilith, she is not yet seen as a deity per se, but more of a powerful nuisance. All of the gods in the Halupu tree are significant but less prominent Sumerian gods, and this is exactly where Lilith finds her place in the most ancient form of Sumerian mythology. The similarities Lilith has to owls should be rather obvious after reading Inanna in the Halupu tree. Lilith makes her home in the trunk of the tree, just like owls. Then she goes off into the uninhabited wilderness, which is often where owls make their homes. Lilith's name is usually translated as night monster or night creature, but can also be translated as screech owl or little owl. As a matter of fact,
Okay, I'm not a monster, I might be a night creature.
Is the Athene
Like the cat.
Noctua Lilith. And yes, the Athene is named after the Greek goddess Athena. The rock crevices in Athens and the Acropolis in ancient Greece were filled with small owls, believed to be the embodiment of Athena. Scholars believe that many aspects of Athena actually come from ancient stories of Lilith. The Lilitu Sumerian myths could have originated with Lilith being the personification of night owls. This personification in the ancient world almost always comes in the form of deification, or becoming a god with an expansive mythology to follow. This can be seen in ancient Egyptian mythology as well, with Sobek as the crocodile god and Horus the falcon-headed god. These definitions and associations between Lilith and owls will be more prominent as we look at our next source for Lilith, which is the book of Isaiah. The only clear reference to Lilith in the entire Bible is found in the book of Isaiah, chapter 34, verse 14. Desert creatures will meet with hyenas, and wild goats will bleat to each other. There the night creatures will also lie down and find for themselves places of rest. That translation was from the NIV, or the New International Version, and the NIV chooses to translate the Hebrew word leleth as night creatures. The King James Version translates it as screech owl, and the NRSV, or the New Revised Standard Version, translates it as Lilith. So what's going on here? What does the author of this section of the book of Isaiah really mean when he uses the Hebrew word leleth? Does he really believe in Lilith, the Sumerian storm god and demoness? Historically speaking, here is frankly what's going on. The myth of the Sumerian Lilitu had longevity, meaning the mythology of Lilith didn't die out as many myths often do over time. What started in Sumerian mythology continued into Akkadian, Assyrian,
Something went wrong. Please try again.
As well. And we know that ancient civilizations shared ideas when two different cultures came into contact with one another. Most of them didn't live in their own little clans with no outside influence. Ancient civilizations came into contact with one another in two different ways, through trade routes and through military conquest. But an interesting thing happens when two cultures cross-pollinate. One culture usually takes the ideas and concepts from another culture and they adapt it and change it slightly to fit in their cultural landscape. This happens all the time in the ancient world, especially in the case of religion and mythologies. So what likely happened is that the mythology of Lilith spread westward via trade routes and military conquests, and eventually made its way as far west as the Mediterranean Sea, and even beyond. A quick and easy example of this can be seen by taking a look at Inanna, the goddess mentioned in the Haluku tree story. Inanna was Sumerian. She was later known as Ishtar in Babylonian mythology. And then the Canaanites, Hittites, and Egyptians adopted her mythology and called her Astarte. Then her mythology spread as far west as Greece and Rome. The Greeks called her Aphrodite, and the Romans Venus. Now obviously there are some differences between all of these different goddesses. The point I'm trying to make here is that Inanna started it all. She was the blueprint for all of these other goddesses. And when these cultures found out
Hi guys and gals, BCK here. Well, I saw this and I thought that this is very good information because it's meth addiction. Now, I don't know a whole lot about meth addiction because, well, frankly, I've never tried meth. And I never will. And hopefully no one around me will. But I think that since it is a astronomical problem in the rural areas as well as suburbia, the city, it's everywhere. Now, it may have started there, and it's definitely easy to make it there. And so that's why a lot of people go visit Ben Hill. Because I believe all those little outhouse thingies were meth things, where they made the meth. Okay, let's go ahead and listen to to this gentleman.
Resulting in devastating medical, psychological, social, and legal consequences. Meth is typically known as a rural drug for several reasons. First and foremost, it's easily manufactured using over-the-counter and household ingredients, and the relative isolation of rural communities can aid in meth production, keeping it on the low key as the fumes often go unnoticed. And finally, the economic devastation of rural areas sadly can entice residents to abuse the drug.
During the 3.5 years that I went back and forth to Old Line, Iowa, I told myself that I was searching for the meaning of meth in small town America. That is certainly true, but I think I was also looking for the meaning of a small town in my own life and in my family's history. And what, if anything, had changed so profoundly that when I would tell my father what I was seeing in Iowa, he was made to wonder if he would even recognize the place whence he comes. Rural America remains the cradle of our national creation myth, but it has become something else too, something more sinister and difficult to define. Whether meth changed our perception of the American small town or simply brought to light the fact that things in small town America are much changed is in some ways irrelevant. In my telling, meth has always been less an agent of change and more a symptom of it. The end of a way of life is the story. The drug is what signaled to the rest of the nation that the end had come.
A way to understand the effect on a family is, imagine a family where one of the parents has a secret lover. So that person has started to care about something very much that is destructive to the family and really has no place. It competes for resources, attention, and love. Except this is the most incredible secret lover in the world. And even when the kids start to hurt and the money that's going to put clothes on their back is disappearing and the other spouse is fighting, the person who's got the meth problem can't give it up. And it's like an irrational, crazy love of something that is absolutely destructive. Another thing you see, particularly with meth, which is really hard to take, is that when people use meth, they are sexually much more uninhibited. And then and that's part of the appeal for some people to use meth, to have meth and have sex, at a circuit party or something. Some of that inhibition extends to children. So in the child protective services in a lot of these communities, they are overrun with kids who have been sexually abused by their parents who are addicted to meth. And that, of the things I treated in my clinical career, that was always the hardest thing, even for people 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, to get over that violation of trust. It's really fundamental.
It's just horrible, isn't it? That's our problem. That's one of our biggest problems in a nutshell. We need to do something about the meth. We don't need pain management. We need meth management. We need a task force on this and on it now. Come on, people, okay. Half of a problem is identifying the problem. The other half is solving the problem. So let's get on it, people. This is what has happened in Hawkins County and several other counties. That makes me sick. I think I'm going to be visiting these sites. I'm going to find out what's happened.
It's hard to speak in America.
thing that probably surprised me is that I started out looking at it like everybody else, which is, this would be 6 years ago, I guess, as isn't it crazy that you can make this drug in your sink? I never, until I got into doing the reporting of this book, which took 4 years, I
Looks
never
like a
put
good
it
book.
into any social or economic or political context. And as I began to think of it that way, it became increasingly surprising to me that I had never done it, that I had never looked at that, but that nobody else seemed to be either. Because how can you understand something as pervasive as this if you don't attempt to account for its economics, its sociology, its cultural implications, and the politics that drive it. And so that I was just a little ashamed of that. But even today, we continue to look at it as something that is a unidimensional. It's just something that's out there. It's just something that people who aren't like us do. And that's part of how it becomes crippling.